Hello, I am Amy Weber, and I am a clinical social worker, and I am with Jennifer Volpe, who is a speech and language pathologist, and we are the co-founders of Speak, Learn, and Play, which is an interdisciplinary pediatric practice in Brooklyn. And we are talking today about supporting siblings of neurodivergent kids. We have a lot of neurodivergent kids coming into our office, and we have a whole lot of siblings waiting out in the waiting room. And it can feel really unfair that the work that we do tends to be very play-based, and it can be really hard for the siblings to sit outside in the waiting room while their sibling gets to come in and play. Even if they understand that it's a therapeutic benefit to them, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't necessarily feel like it. So we thought that this was a very important topic to cover today. So I am going to start from the mental health perspective of how to support siblings. And then Jen will talk about from a speech and language perspective. Before I start getting into the real tips and tricks, I want to talk about how we think about behavior and really think about zooming out on how we, not just our own children's behavior, but how do we think about people who are behaving differently out in the community, out in the world? How do we think about them? How do we talk about them? I am not perfect at this by any stretch of the imagination. I very often will say, oh, that person is crazy. They're doing the wrong thing. This is frustrating to me. And I think we all do that, but we really have to be careful about how we think about human behavior in a broad sense and put on our X-ray vision goggles and see behavior through a lens of compassion and not judgment. So this is a person that is struggling. Yes, they are yelling. Yes, it's scary. And they're a person who's struggling. They're not a bad person. They're not a crazy person. They're not a scary person. So I think it really starts there with how we think about difference especially in behavior in a broad sense, and how we're modeling that for our kids at home. The next thing I like to encourage families to do is to talk about your own brain, not even your neurodivergent child's brain, but your own brain, because that makes it like this is something that we're all working on. I really like the language of owl brain, which is your thinking brain, your logical brain, your brain that's primed for learning, that's well regulated, that's connected to the people around you. And then watchdog brain, which is sort of that fight or flight response where you're stressed out and maybe you're starting to yell. Maybe that's when the punches start getting thrown or something goes flying across the room. And then possum brain, which is the pathway that you are in when you are on your phone and sort of, doom scrolling or playing Candy Crush or something like that. When you're really like tuned out to what's going on around you, kind of daydreamy, la la land, or overly involved in a book and just can't put it down and not aware of what's happening around you. So those are the three ways that I like to talk about brains: owl brain, watchdog brain, possum brain. We all have these brains and they're there to protect us from stress. So I will come home and say, like, oh, my watchdog brain was active today because, my coworker said this and I just felt so angry about it. And my watchdog was there and I said this awful thing, or, so really normalizing that this is how brains operate. We're not all in our owl brain all the time. It's not even the goal to be in our owl brain all the time because our nervous system and our brains are there to protect us when there's real danger. So talking about your own brain and your own responses normalizes things. And I think that's really important. I also think it's very important to talk about behavior honestly. So some families will say, in this house, we believe that all behavior is a clue to what's going on. All behavior is a clue that this person is really stressed. And again, it keeps it curious and not judgmental. We want to try to keep out of the the idea that there's something wrong with this person because they're stressed out. Because we all feel stressed out at times. And we want to keep the focus on the brain and not the behavior. So it feels really scary when your brother's watchdog brain takes over. We want to acknowledge that the behavior is not okay and let the siblings know what you are doing to help. So it's not okay that he hit you. That is not okay. I am not okay with that. And I am reading a book to learn more about how brains work. And your brother is going to therapy to help him learn how to better control his watchdog brain. So really, I would talk about, this is not okay. What happened here is I am not okay with that. And this is what we're doing to make things better. It's not going to change overnight. But, your brother is taking medication and he's going to speech therapy to learn how to use his words. And I am in a parent class to learn more about how to help him when he's feeling upset. Whatever you're doing, because you're doing a lot to help, I would let your kids know what you're doing to help. The next thing is to validate their feelings. And sometimes this feels really scary. But kids need language to talk about what's going on. And they sometimes feel like they wish they had a different sister or brother. They wish that they had a normal family. It feels unfair to them. It's embarrassing when the sibling screams like that. And it's okay to say those things out loud. We want to encourage our kids to be able to express how they're feeling. I would encourage them to do it with you in a private moment as opposed to, in front of the sibling. But, validating how they're feeling is not agreeing with how they're feeling. It's just putting words to it. And they need those words. They need those words to be able to talk about it. Help them feel less alone. The siblings in our waiting room will often create their own little support group. They start playing together and hanging out together in the waiting room because it's boring to be the sibling and to be waiting for your sibling to come out. So whatever resources you might have in your area, there's something great called SIB shops. They're all over New York City. I think they're probably all over the country. Look up SIB shops in your area, connect with other families, and grieve. This is a hard family to be in, and it might not be the family that you planned to have. And it's okay to say those things out loud. It's okay to grieve because grieving isn't giving up. It's creating an honest narrative and owning your own feelings without shame and judgment. And I think that's really important to model for all of our kids, our neurodivergent kids and our neurotypical kids. It's really important to own our own feelings and be honest about them without shame or judgment. So, on to sort of the tips and tricks. When you have one dysregulated child, what should the other child do? And this is really important. I would make this plan with them not when you are in the midst of a crisis, but in a calm moment when everybody is in their owl brain or the green zone or whatever language you use in your house. I would sit down with your neurotypical siblings or your less dysregulated kids and say, okay, so when your sibling gets these big behaviors, these big feelings, this is what I want you to do. And map it out with them. Is there somewhere they should go? Some families will say, go to my bedroom, close the door, wait for me to call you. Um, in your room, under your bed or in a closet, you could put a little box of stuff that's like your emergency kit, like noise canceling headphones, a snack, a juice box, a puzzle, some fidgets to squeeze or hold. Anything that you can think of that might help them in that moment to occupy themselves and make it like a safe away place. I would explain what you are doing. My job is to keep everyone safe. I am keeping your sister safe by sticking with her, making sure she's not throwing things, making sure she's not hurting herself, making sure she's not hurting anybody else. I want to keep you safe by telling you to go to my room, close the door, wait for me to call you. There's this emergency box, whatever you are doing to keep everybody safe. I would let them know that. You can also say, and I would encourage you to say, I wish it wasn't like this. I wish it wasn't. I have to pay attention to the most scared, the most dangerous brain first. And it's not fair. And I see how this is impacting you, and you are not invisible. And using that language is really important for siblings because they do feel invisible. It's like, why is mom paying attention to this kid who's throwing something across the room and then they get all the attention and I'm getting nothing and I'm the one who got the stuffed animal hit me in the head and she's not doing anything. So it's really, really important to let them know what you're doing and that you wish it wasn't like this and that you hope it won't be like this forever. But right now, your job is to keep them safe. And this is the best way to do that. Teach your kids about psychological boundaries. Something like sometimes people, when they are really angry, they say really mean things and it might hurt your feelings. And those things aren't true. Um, we have to acknowledge that the words hurt. Absolutely. If you're an idiot, you're this, you're that, that hurts and it's awful. And we can kind of create an imaginary force field around us and imagine the comments bouncing off. So I work on that for myself, and I encourage parents to work on that for themselves and then encourage your siblings. And that's just a life skill. There are going to be lots of other people who say hurtful things and they do need to kind of create a force field around. Like, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. It's bouncing off my force field and I'm moving on. If you've got two or more kids who are dysregulated and screaming at each other, all you can do, and this is a complete downer, all you can do is triage that situation. There is no magic here. Whoever is the most dysregulated and the most dangerous is the person that needs to be tended to first. Um, and just know that it sucks. This is awful. It sucks. There aren't enough resources often to tend to everybody's needs. I mean, so many families that I work with, if there were an appropriate after school program and there was a sitter that could manage behaviors and like dad didn't need to work long hours, then the whole family might be different. But that's not the reality. Those resources don't exist for some families and for some kids. So it's really hard and it's really awful. And the only thing you can do in that situation is really triage and know that you're not doing it wrong. There's really nothing that you've done wrong to get to that point, and now you're just going to work to put out the fire. And then when you are connected to your own owl brain, you can think about, okay, so what might be a structure that would work better? Maybe coming home and doing homework is too high of an expectation. So I'm going to lower the bar a little bit there, or I'm going to make sure everybody has a snack before I start asking for everybody to sit down and do homework. Or maybe the screen time needs to be turned off through the Wi-Fi as opposed to me asking to take the device. Maybe that's just too much of an ask. But how can you maybe tweak little things that you're doing to lower the demands and lower the stress in your house? And know that that's not failing. It's surviving. It's really saying, okay, I need to set everybody up here for safety, and getting homework done is a low priority right now. So with all of that, and that feels a very heavy place to leave you, I am going to turn things over to Jen.
Oh. Thank you, Amy. Amy's always a hard act to follow. I should really go first. My name is Jennifer Volpe. I am a speech language pathologist. Yeah. And Amy introduced us, but happy to be here and to talk about this. From a speech perspective, it's a little bit different, right? We're not dealing with the mental health piece. We're not dealing with, sort of how to help kids feel like it's fair. But we do get a lot of siblings who really want to come and play. And as Amy said, our office is fun. We're playmates. We have a sensory gym, and kids in the waiting room see this, and all they want to do is come in and play. And it doesn't matter if they're much older siblings or they're younger siblings. They just want to know what is behind that waiting room door. And, it actually made me think when I don't know, Amy, if you remember her, my first employee ever. She had a sister that had some pretty significant, I want to say, neurological stuff, like maybe part of the brain was missing. And I remember her talking to one of the kids and saying, "Yeah, I used to be that sibling. I was the one who had to wait in the waiting room." And I guess in her case, it kind of led her into a field of helping people and service. I know that is, not necessarily true for all kids, but I think for kids who want it, and again, this is not going to be all kids, but for kids who want to be partners in this, I think having them and integrating them into aspects of therapy can be super helpful. Siblings have a little bit different view of the family dynamic. They're a little, they're kind of more, they see things from a kid's perspective, right? Or maybe they even go to the same schools and they know a little bit more about the social dynamics than maybe, a parent does. So they kind of can give some feedback for kids. So they can serve as a really great model for some of our kids. Sometimes we have older kids who want to sort of be the teacher. So that works really well for some of our kids with articulation difficulties. They'll come in and, we'll be like, "Here's the homework. This is what you're going to, help do." And then on the reverse side, and I'm thinking of one student in particular, and her sister is very young. She actually takes what we do and she then teaches it to her sister at home. Mom emails me and she says, "Oh, they're playing school." So in that way, siblings can be really supportive. With older siblings, sometimes we'll ask them, like, what do you wish your sibling could do with you? What do you wish you could play with them? What do you wish was, different? And see if there are ways to sort of, you know, integrate that into some of our functional goals, right? Maybe they want to play a specific game, and maybe that's something that we can work on through therapy. We sometimes have them come in for the last 5 minutes, and give them some space, to have fun with us and to kind of see what's going on and making them part of the therapeutic process. For some of our kids who have siblings who are nonverbal, I'm having them program some of their voice into the devices, right? And they program their own name, or maybe they do all of it. We had one sibling where the sibling did the entire device and everything was their name, which is cool. And then, it's sort of for our kids who, have difficulty with transitioning, even putting their siblings on the visual schedule that they use, right, to make it again part of the family and integrate it more into everybody's sort of everyday. And the research shows that if you can get your sibling to be engaged, and obviously this is not something they have to do, right? Because we don't want to for some of our older kids, but if they want to, the outcomes for families and for the kids in general tend to be more positive. Amy mentioned sib shops as the way siblings can get together. There's also a book written by a speech pathologist called Everybody Needs a Turn. It talks a lot about how to talk to your neurotypical kid, and then discussions, kind of like conversation starters to have some of those harder conversations that Amy was talking about. But yeah, I think anytime that we can bring a sibling into sort of the therapy realm, kind of everybody wins. There still is a lot of, "Mom, I want to go to speech." I mean, we even had one kid whose parent put him in for a semester for like extra reading support. And it really sort of, I mean, he needed it, and that's obviously not the best thing to do with people who don't need it. But, just even being able to feel like, "Oh, I had a problem and now it's fixed." And yes, it's cool because I can go to the same place that my brother goes to. But yeah, you know, they're taking care of me too, was kind of the vibe I got from him. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there's really, from the speech side, it's more about bringing the siblings and the families into the fold than sort of talking to them about the mental health aspect. So yeah, so we will leave it to questions.
I know before we hit record, there was a question about a child with autism gets big rewards when she tries something new that's really hard for her. And the other siblings were like, hey, what about me? I mean, I can do that stuff. Why don't you give me a Lego set? And how do you address that? And I think being honest is the most important thing, saying you have a hard time doing these things, she has a hard time doing those things. If you want to earn a Lego set, you want to earn a restaurant trip, like let's talk about what your goals are. What are some things that you might like to work towards and learn? And then we can figure out what reward, whether it's Roblox or if it's going out to dinner or if it's a Lego set he wants or whatever. So it's not exactly the same, but he might feel like there's a little bit more fairness there. But having him set up what his goals are. Do you want to make the swim team? Do you want to be able to swim back and forth and do that fancy turn that Olympic swimmers do at the end of the pool? But that can also help.
I think Jacqueline put some questions in the chat that we've had from people who are going to watch the recording later. So let's see. First question: what are some fun language building activities or games that both my neurotypical and neurodivergent children can participate in together? Ooh, that is a good one. I think that really depends on their ages and at what levels are they functioning at. Language building, I mean, I'm a big fan of board games, so I feel like there are a lot of really good board games that are either cooperative board games where they all have the same goal, which can really help with sort of working together and negotiating and maybe even work on the bond, but also require executive functioning skills and talking to each other. So you're still talking about language, but even games against each other. Uno is always a big hit. So it's not language building, but it taking turns, right? Managing disappointment. And there's not a big, like heavy cognitive load. So yeah, I guess it's really going to depend on if your neurodivergent child, how they handle losing and winning may determine if you want something from like Peaceable Kingdom, like Race to the Treasure, where you kind of have to work with each other to kind of get the path. We want to get to the gold. Gnomes at Night, maybe for, kids who are a little bit higher, but you'll have to work together. So I think that would be good.
In my board games group, we play a lot of team games. So you can set it up so it's adults versus kids. So it puts all the kids or have one parent on each team if you're a two-parent household. Taboo is a really fun one. And we've been really loving Forbidden Island and Forbidden Desert. We often come back to Castle Panic is another one that we really like. So they're really fun for older kids, and it's a cooperative game. So there's a decent amount of challenge, but it's also it's really fun. And you're all winning and losing together, which can soften the blow of a loss.
And a lot of those games will come in junior versions. Like Castle Panic has a junior version. So if you have kids who are a little bit younger, that's good, right? Even a game like Candyland, and again, maybe not necessarily language building, but there are things that they can do together. And pretend play, sword fighting, that kind of stuff is also can be good. Playing school, playing kitchen, again, depending on the age gap and the kind of levels of ability.
I think we have another question. Are there communication tools or apps that could help my neurotypical child engage with their sibling, especially if the neurodivergent child uses alternative communication methods?
I'm not an AAC expert, so I don't know of any apps off the top of my head. But if your child uses alternative communication methods, they probably have a device, the devices can be programmed. They're really flexible in how they can be programmed. So if your kids have a game that they really like to play, or they have a TV show that they really like to watch together, you can program that stuff into the board. So I want to watch Bluey, or will you watch Bluey with me? Those are things that can be programmed. So I think that that's probably the best way to go about it.
What signs should I watch for if my neurotypical child is struggling emotionally or behaviorally because of their siblings' needs? You're never going to know fully. Is it because of the neurodivergent child? Is it because of school stress? But I would look for the same things that you would look for ordinarily, is sort of a switch in their mood or in their behavior that goes on for several weeks, not one bad day or kind of a rough few days or, but I would really look for, wow, my kid has their personality has shifted, their eating has shifted. They used to be a great sleeper and now they're waking up multiple times in the middle of the night, or they're not falling asleep at night. Then those are times that I would say, okay, it's time to kind of take a look at what resources might be available, whether it's a mental health therapist or somebody at school. Sometimes they have support groups at school, or, different options that there might be for some mental health support. But I usually tell parents to wait until things are, I mean, you don't want anybody to struggle, but I would wait until things have been seemingly stressed and rough for a few weeks at least, before kind of making um
And I think there's one more. How can I encourage positive sibling relationships and reduce rivalry or resentment, which I sort of feel you talked about in terms of the goal setting for the neurotypical kids.
I think anytime you can figure out an activity together to do, that can be really good. I have a lot of families that will, kind of divide and conquer. And, if one sibling is in therapy or in an activity, then that's an opportunity for you to take the other sibling out for a special treat, or, a walk around the block, or a quick trip to a local playground, so that you're spending some special time with them. It's never going to be equal, and it's never going to be exactly the same. And everybody is going to feel that. And it can be really hard for you as a parent to be like, oh my God, I'm not like, I spend so much time going to therapy, sitting in the waiting room, going here, going there. We do everything. Our lives revolve around this kid with autism, this kid with ADHD, this kid with a learning disability. And I feel badly for how my other kid is not getting all of the same treatment and not getting the same kind of attention. And again, it's one of those things that you have to really notice and own and be honest about. You honest with yourself and honest with your other kids, and say, yeah, this is how it is. And I wish it wasn't like this. It might not be like this forever. And this is what we're trying to do to help. This is how I'm going to, let's, you and I have a special date. Let's go out, you and me just go out for dinner and she'll stay home. Or let's take a walk around the block while swimming lessons are going on, and we're not going to watch today because we don't need to. And make the time when you can. And again, it's never going to be equal. It's never going to be exactly the same, but your kid will appreciate that you're making the effort. They'll see that. Any other questions?
For me, hasn't been so much an issue with my youngest son, again, neurotypical child, and he is very observant of the way that we interact with our 10-year-old daughter. Um, One of the things that has been the hardest has been explaining to him how she is so intelligent, extremely superbly intelligent, very eloquent, language, everything, does very well at school, but then has this, again, fight flight reactions and the amygdala overdrive, and like why she doesn't get as much trouble as he would if she engages in those behaviors at school versus him. It's so hard to explain that to him. And I I like the idea of like explaining the different brain parts, but still as a concept for him, like how can she be so smart and not know that this is not okay is very hard. Like this weekend, she was calling him a jerk and different things that he's not allowed to do, right? And neither is she, but she gets more of a pass because she's having a hard time. But it's a hard one, I think.
Yeah. It's really, really hard. And I think the best thing you can do is say, she's having a tough time. Like, I would really label it as she's struggling right now. This behavior, that calling you a jerk, means she's actually really, really stressed out. And we might not, we can get curious about why she's stressed out. We can try and be detectives and figure it out. And we might never know. We're kind of guessing. I barely know why I'm stressed half the time. Sometimes there's a clear trigger and sometimes there's not, and you can guess. But I would really frame it as, she's in her watchdog brain, just like you would be if when you yell that she's a jerk. That's, you're in your watchdog brain, and we all get there. I probably thought somebody was a jerk 7 times on my way to the to get to the office this morning. So labeling it and normalizing it, and yeah, it's not okay. It's not okay. And this is what we're doing to help. We're she's doing these things and I'm doing these things, and you can imagine that force field, because his sister is not the only person who's ever going to call him a jerk, right? Like, there will be, he'll have some conflict with a peer at school who's mean to him, or a boss will be mean to him or whatever. And being able to develop that idea of a force field and psychological boundaries of, like, she called you a jerk. It's wrong. It's mean and it's wrong. And she should not have said that. And it's not true. You're not a jerk. Do you think you're a jerk? No, you're not a jerk. Of course you're not a jerk. You just didn't want to share whatever with her at that point. That doesn't make you a jerk. It's okay. You haven't done anything wrong. And just imagine those words bouncing off of your force field. They're not sinking in. So really talking about it with him and labeling it. Any other questions? Thank you so much for joining us live. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next webinar is about preparing for the holidays.
Oh, that's right. Gosh, I
Yes.
can't believe we're here already.
I know. December 2nd at noon. And you will get the link for this as well. And you will get the handout that goes with today's workshop. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And please, you can always email us, Speak, Learn, and Play, brooklyn@gmail.com if you have any questions or any follow-up. We're always happy to help. Bye. Thank you so much.